You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. Welcome here again this week for more Snarky Faith Radio. And hey, has anyone been catching some stuff that's been going on in the news? Anything new in the past week or two? Any kind of outrage that's happening? I can't think of anything. It slipped my mind. And so in these times of peril, in these times where things don't make sense and you kind of say, what the F is going on? I find it best to kind of sit down and talk with one of your friends. And just as luck may have it, I actually did this. I actually recorded an interview with one of my good friends a while back. And I kept telling myself, when would be a good time? When would be a good time? I think this is a good time. But before we get to that, we got to get to a brief bit of the Christian Crazy of the Week, starring none other than Jim Bakker. Jim Bakker, take it away.
Lord have mercy. The Lord is my shepherd. He know what I want.
Have you ever seen a time when we hate our president like the people do now? I mean,
No,
people,
never seen
literally
anything
half the nation hates the president.
So this is a bit of an odd one. Jim's actually starting out with a fair amount of truth so far. Yeah, a lot of people hate the president. Me included.
I've never seen anything like it, and I can't understand that.
And I said, Lord, where are we in the Bible?
FYI, Jimbo, a bookmark would kind of help that out and really alleviate the need for prayer when you're asking God, where am I in the Bible?
And you know, I opened my Bible and God led me back to where I teach all the time.
In Revelation?
The book of Revelation, chapter 6. He said, you are in Revelation chapter 6.
That's a solid, firm grasp of the obvious. My Bible is open. Where am I? Lord, I have misplaced my glasses. Oh, you're in Revelation? So I am. Well done, Jim. Well done.
Revelation chapter 6 is the four horsemen of the apocalypse. He said, Donald Trump is a respite in this troubled times, and I sent him in grace to give you time to prepare for what's coming on earth.
So here's where we boil down to two camps here. If Jim's right, God is a total a-hole. And if I'm right, Jim is full of crap. That's as simple as it gets.
The first horse of the apocalypse has started to ride, but I just wanted to let you know where we are. We are in Revelation 6.
So wait, Jim, are you talking about the triple crown of the apocalypse of horse racing right now? The Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the end of times? What? This is crazy. This is history in the making. Tell me more.
We're in the horse. The first horse is out of the barn. The first horse
Wait.
is
Are we
riding.
talking about Trump again here? Or a horse? I'm a little confused, Jim. Because I know you're going to swing back to talking about how much you love Trump and that God has him whatever. And you know, if I was a generous person, I would actually let you finish. I do on most occasions. Yeah, I'm going to stop you right there because I have this ongoing theory, and I'm not sure if it's real or not. And it's very much a snarky theory that I've had in conversations with people over beers, so take it for what it's worth moving forward because you've been warned. It's more of an amusing thought than it is reality, but I had this idea of, hey, what if the rapture already happened on the earth like years ago? And at the time, there was too few people for humanity to actually notice, and we're just living in purgatory. Fun thoughts in the land of Trumpiness here in America. Oh, that's fun. But you know what's fun? Let's get to my interview with Justin Meyer. So I'm sitting here with one of my good friends, and I want you guys to meet for the first time here on this radio show, hopefully not the last, my good friend Justin Meyer. And Justin's job title alone sounds like a resume. Justin's a pastor, an Anglican bishop, a college professor, a therapist, and he also works in political consulting. Am I covering that correctly, Justin? Is that kind of the spectrum?
Yeah, it is, and I dabble in politics a little, not just the consulting, right? I'm on my local city council, and I'm president of the Chamber of Commerce in my community too.
Awesome. Justin, thanks so much for taking time to be here on the show. So I've got a hard-hitting question to start you off. And when I typically say that, it's not hard-hitting at all. So my big question is this: why did the theologian cross the road?
Why, Stuart?
No, I'm asking you. This is one of those dumb idiotic questions. So I'd be curious for your answer on this, because you're a person who I enjoy your philosophizing.
Does the road really exist, I guess, is the first question.
That is equally political and religious, I think, in how you're answering this. So that
and then second is, does the road lead to one destination or many?
Ooh.
And yes, on the road, are we following anyone, or are people following us? So those would be questions that I would ask before answering the question. But for me, maybe it's just to take a vacation. I don't know.
Love it. So Justin, you are, for those that don't know you, and I'll just share a little bit of my experience with you. And the way my experiences with you go is I've always enjoyed them. I've always enjoyed being able to hang out with you. And we typically, when we sit down, we talk very honestly. Not a lot of BS going on. And so, Justin, I wanted to get the unfiltered, your view, your take on where, and this is a big one, where in the world, or not where in the world, but how is the church missing the mark today in America? My listeners hear me talk about this on a regular basis. I'd like to hear your take on that. How is the church missing the mark? How far and how wide are we missing the mark?
Well, I think we do some things well, but I do think we're really missing the mark in some areas. And, my perception has really changed since going from the machine, right, working in denominational stuff, working at big conferences, speaking at those types of things, and going to just being a local pastor. The two different ball games, but I think I actually understand more being on the ground, working every day in a local church than I thought I knew when I was working for the machine. And so one of the areas that I think we're missing the mark in is just really engaging in the community, engaging in culture, in loving, servant-minded ways. That come from a posture of trying to become friends, of living in peace with people, right? Usually when we do good things or things that should be perceived as good, usually we view it as a point that I'm doing it for someone. So I have a posture of I'm better, right? And I think we need to go to a posture of we're just trying to make friends. Like, you build relationships with people by having things in common, but also living in a mutually beneficial relationship. And so sometimes you need to bring things to the table, right? That's how relationships are built. And so if you come to the table with providing a service or helping someone, whether that be in a food pantry or whether that be in a clothing closet or working at a homeless shelter or whatever it is, I think one of the ways we in the westernized church especially miss the mark is by going and just simply trying to create relationships rather than checking off a box that says, ooh, I did my good deed for the week, the month, or the year. So that would probably be the first way. The second way is something that has recently become near and dear to my heart. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think one of the biggest ways we've missed the mark in the church, and even I think we struggle still with it in society and culture as a whole, but is dealing with mental health and mental illness.
So when we talk about that, because I know that you're doing work that, especially as a therapist and as, I would say a faith-based activist, if that, if that's fair, in especially in your community. And I know you were mentioning this to me when we talked the other day. You were talking about ACEs, which is the adverse childhood experiences. And I found that to be something fascinating. You sent me some different videos to watch on it, and I was like, oh, this is like, I feel like I'm only scratching the surface. And I know this is something that you've been dealing with, and you've kind of these concepts you've been delving into. So can you give us like a little bit of a rundown? What is like a synopsis? Give us a summary.
Yeah, well, let me start with the division first. So there is general mental illness that we find in our community, and it can happen because of drugs in a person's life. It can happen because of abuse. People can be born with mental illness at times. So there are different causes of mental illness, and I think the church has completely struck out almost when dealing with mental illness. And I think Jesus actually dealt with mental illness a lot as we read scriptures. But on the other hand, what's interesting is just even in the area of mental health, which all of us deal with different mental health aspects, people dealing with depression, people dealing with burnout, people dealing with adverse work situations, adverse parenting situations. I mean, the list is on and on that can contribute to a person's mental health. But in the area of mental health, what we're finding is not only does it connect to psychological benefits, psychological health, but it's actually translating into physical health. So my primary area that I've been dealing with recently is, as you mentioned, the adverse childhood experience, the ACEs. And so we're dealing in areas like emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, mother treated violently, household substance abuse issues, household mental illness issues, parental separation or divorce, incarceration of a household member. So the CDC, ACEs are actually scientifically proven. It was research done by the CDC. It's also been research done by the American Academy of Pediatrics. I mean, so these aren't just philosophical ideas right now. These are tested theories that have been proven to be true. But if a child suffers from adverse experiences in their childhood, it can play out in leading to obesity. It can play out into high blood pressure. What's amazing is if a child suffers from 7 or 8 of the adverse childhood experiences without help, a person can take 20 years off their life expectancy.
Wow.
So, this is actually a critical area that the church can be dealing with, because the treatment to overcome some of these adverse effects are if the church acts the way it should act according to Scripture and creates community the way I think that Jesus and Scripture intended, it actually helps erase the consequences of these adverse effects. But listen how simple these ACE categories are. These are the questions. This is just a simple ACE test. It's the one that's put out by the CDC. You answer 10 questions and it says, did a parent or other adult in your household often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid, or you might be physically hurt? I can point to a lot of kids that live like that, right? I mean, if you watch most contemporary sporting films of like high school coaches with kids, they're swearing at them all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, does a parent or someone you look up to, is another way to phrase it, constantly insult you, put you down, cuss at you, or humiliate you? Okay, let's move on. Did a parent or other adult in your household often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks and were injured? 3, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch, fondle, or have you touch their body in a sexual way, try to or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal sex with you? Molestation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Next, did you often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought that you were important or special? Your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Next, did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one protect you? Your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if needed? Were your parents ever separated or divorced? That's over half of society today, right?
Yeah.
Was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or something thrown at her? Or sometimes or often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something harder, or ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with gun or knife? Did you ever live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic, who used street drugs? Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or attempt suicide? How many people deal with depression today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did your household member go to prison? So I just went through this myself, asked myself these questions with you. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. I know. I was doing the same thing. I was like, oh man, are you talking to me a little bit here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
I know. Yeah.
A score of 8.
Yeah.
And so I have a life expectancy of 20 years less than I would if I didn't experience two less of these.
Yeah.
Right? I suffer with high blood pressure. I'm on meds right now. I struggle with my weight frequently. And I'm not looking to say these are all the problems. Like, I have responsibility in some of this too, right? I can watch my eating and different things like that. But according to the CDC, as your ACE score rises, the severity of the problems that you are contributed to as an adult also increase. And so to me, that is pretty amazing when these are pretty simple things that happen in our everyday society.
No, this is fascinating. And I like how that you're talking about this, not simply just from a clinical standpoint, but also bringing it into like our conversation we're having about where the church is missing the mark. I mean, I feel like one of the things that has always bothered me, and it's something I didn't know why it bothered me until I went through seminary. And, as you're going through the process, you have like a class on counseling. And I've seen this. I've experienced this just on my own when I was just going to churches younger, that pastors assume that they are counselors. They assume that in a certain sense they are almost like spiritual psychiatrists, and they do not have the training, they do not have the depth, they do not have the backing. And the sad thing is, a lot of people that stand in that position of pastor do not want to admit that. Right. They do not want to admit that. Part of it is that whole break between the spiritual and that religion and science can never meet together, and it's a sad thing, but it can also be something that's so damaging that we've seen. I mean, we will get to talking about certain dumpster fires, but even talking about the SBC and Paige Patterson and talking about how he had counseled abused women to kind of tough it out, girl, stick with it, and just pray a lot. And those kind of counseling situations, that would be like malpractice if you were actually licensed to do what you're doing, which pastors are not.
No, what is scary is there are actually counseling organizations. So I went through a counseling organization a Christian counseling organization that actually taught that same ideology, like that if a woman's being abused, she shouldn't leave her husband.
Yeah.
Now, here is my wrestling point on that. And, Paige Patterson can have his own feelings and continue to create the dumpster fire that has become the SBC. But, for me, okay, you ask the question, are you in love with your spouse, right? If so, if that is true and your spouse is abusing you, one, we get out of the house, right? We stop the hitting, but we also help get them some help, right? That might, from a Christian perspective, if we're dealing with a Christian perspective, that might be a step. But if the person simply just fears for their life and they're getting the snot knocked out of them even once, it is right to have them automatically exit. And, oh my gosh, I'm going to say something controversial. Help them walk through a divorce process.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think the church should be there.
Yeah. That's what it's there for. I mean, well,
right.
Hypothetically, that's what it's there for. Or
right, to help support, because there's a whole lot of baggage that both men and women go through in the divorce process, and there's bills that have to be paid, and you have to learn to take care of your kids on your own, which in my belief system, the church is there to help support you do that, and take the kids in when you need someone to watch them, as long as those people who are taking the kids in are safe. Right, we have to make that expectation today too. But yes, so the church should rally around those situations, not shy away from them, and entrench them in their culture, right? Because that's what the church is doing. Their pastors are standing up in the pulpit, because it's not just Paige Patterson. There are a number who will stand up and tell people that divorce is something that Jesus and God despise, and if anyone ever goes through it, they will be damned to hell and were never a Christian in the first place. But in reality, it is those exact situations that the church should be caring for, supporting, helping, and rallying around those people, so that true community is taking place, and so people don't have adverse traumatic experiences that can affect their lives until they die.
No, I mean, you're right about that. And one of the things that have always gotten me about that, when we overly spiritualize crap that goes on in life, I mean, sometimes stuff is just horrible. And we just need to call that. Let's not overly spiritualize that. But especially even like threatening hell for divorce, when these women in these situations are already in hell. Like, they are already living in hell. They're terrified for their lives. They're terrified for their kids. And they are just trying to be able to survive. And then to throw guilt on top of that. Yeah. I mean that the church has just exponentially made that situation so much worse. And instead of being a help, it becomes another hindrance towards healing.
And here, I'm not being a proponent of divorce, so please don't. I mean, that contributes to an ACE score, right? One of the questions are, did you live in a family that was separated or divorced?
Sure.
And that can lead, to obesity. That can lead to high blood pressure. That can lead to cutting off years of your life, not individually, but in a complexity of other situations. So, we have to, though. We have to be mindful of how we interact with people, how we deal with situations. I forget who said it. It may have been Alan Hirsch. I don't remember. But he said, the reason people make rules is because they don't want to make decisions. And I think the church has become so good at making rules because they don't actually want to get involved in the everyday aspect of people's lives and make decisions based on situations and circumstances. It's easier just to, we've always dealt with this problem. So if you are struggling in your marriage and you're being abused, divorce means you go to hell, so don't be divorced.
Yeah, no, and I think that was a question I was going to you've actually kind of uncovered a bit. Do you think part of that's the problem with the church is the fact that we no longer want to get our hands dirty? Like, we never, and I don't mean dirty in a dirty way. I mean, actually, like, getting dirty in a way that I'm speaking about when it comes to investment when it comes to things that cost of ourselves as an organization, but also cost of our parishioners and congregants. It's become comfortable. It's become easy. We want to kind of go and just really just check in and check out when it comes to that. And there's no cost. There's no cost to following Christ.
Yeah. There's no cost on the regular church members level. And I think, and you've hit on this in other episodes, the cost for pastors today to run a machine and a company, right? It's all about the dollar, and it's all about the number in the seats, and it's become big business, and in such a completely unhealthy way that they don't get their hands dirty. They don't do any life on life, and they live almost secretive lives. And when that happens, which I'm sure we will talk about later, they live these secretive lives, and they run amok in them, right? And so not only are they not helping the people they're called to lovingly pastor, care for, and support, but they are abusing other people on the side and frivolously spending resources that the church could use in investing to get a little dirty and make sure people are healthy and happy.
No, it ends up being like, I feel like it's the Alex Jones from InfoWars. It's like his defense when he was in court trying to defend, well, he was actually trying to get custody of his kids. And he was saying, oh, all the stuff you see on InfoWars, all the stuff I do, it's really just an act. Like there's the me on stage, and then there's the real me. And I feel like that oftentimes pastors will tell you that this is not true, but there's the them on stage, and then there's the real them that happens. And there's a huge disconnect between those two, and that's when you end up seeing all sorts of weird, sick, twisted stuff come out of that, because they're feeling forced to continue to live a life in this archetype that they have created.
Right.
That isn't even like humanly sustainable.
Right.
No,
not at all. And I think, I've been in some big church ministry and served at some very large churches where at that time I'll admit it, I had a persona that I had to live in public and on the stage. And then I had who I was at home, who was a really kind of messed up, jacked up individual. And I'm not saying everyone who has two personas is messed up and jacked up, but I think that's usually true. I do. I think the Bible actually speaks to it on some levels, that you can't serve two masters, you can't be two people anyways. But I will tell you, when you are the same person everywhere, which is what I really work on trying to be. Now, sometimes I don't always get it right, but I'm a messy person on the stage or in the pulpit, however you want to phrase it. I don't have a pulpit, but at the table that I speak from, I'm a messy person up there, and I'm messy in my personal life to an extent. Like, what you see is what you get, and I think that causes me to not actually have a large, mega church, right? Because one, Christians aren't used to that. And while some of them long for it, it's too big of a step to take, right? To get to that place where they can be open and honest and secure in being a mess themselves. But what I have found, and not that it's about numbers by any means, but when I got to the small community that I live in now, there were 8 people at the church that I took. We lost 5 of them very quickly. But we have baptized over 150 people now who weren't in church, who never really had gone to church, who had adverse feelings when we talked about the institution of faith. And I think we connect well with them because I'm the same person, and we're all allowed to be messy together, right? None of us are trying to put on a show for the other. And so some people from the established church world come to us and are excited because they're seeing some people have some changes take place in their lives, because we're really intentional about working on that. And we're really intentional about community. But at the point that we start asking them to be open about their mess, they're out the door quick.
Yeah.
I mean, really quick. And so that's just one of those interesting things I think we see in our culture today. And my gamble is that those pastors that have those dual personalities, more often than not, have a very quiet but very serious dumpster fire going on at home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're able to be open and honest about it all the time, it seems to hamper that fire a lot, because people hold you accountable then in the community, because you're never on a pedestal. You're like, oh, you're just that broken pastor that deals with broken people. So
no, I think you're right about that. I mean, I think that what ends up happening a lot of times too, with the image that's projected from the virtual pulpit, the parishioners, the congregations, what they do is they go and do likewise. You know, I feel like we have cosplay Christians now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like, dude, you're not really Wolverine. You know, we all know you're not Wolverine. Right? Sweet costume, but seriously, you're not Wolverine. And I feel like that can be said for a lot of the American church. Like, dude, you don't look anything like Jesus. Like, you may be trying to walk the walk and talk the talk, but you're not doing anything. You just kind of do that on Sunday, and you've ascribed to kind of cosplaying what it means to be an American Christian.
Yeah.
It's white, votes a certain way, and looks and acts nothing like Jesus. And that is a huge fundamental like issue with the church. I feel like the church, Christianity in America, has become very just fractured. It's become very schizophrenic in what it is and what it was actually supposed to be. Because you know, and schizophrenic in the way of like, wait, which voices are leading us now? And like, what is that core voice? Like, where is that core personality? Like, we've lost it. We've gone off on these other tangents now.
Well, I think we preach a schizophrenic God too. So you get schizophrenic God, right? Either a God of hate or love, depending on what testament you read. And, you know, and so that's so disconnected. I do think when we preach a schizophrenic God, we then begin, you know, a God that loves everybody, but then sends majority of people to hell that, you know, maybe have not heard of him, or never mind, different soapbox. But you have the schizophrenic God, which turns into people who preach him being schizophrenic, would then, as you said, go and do likewise, turns into congregations that are schizophrenic.
Absolutely, yeah. And so within this too, well, what before we walk away from the ACEs stuff too, I wanted you to act like how have you seen that practically, especially that you're beginning to work with people in the community under one, you know, having a spiritual outlook, but also having a clinical outlook. How are you doing this? How are you seeing this kind of come to fruition? Or what are the outputs that you've seen?
So here is one of the major causes that having a lot of traumatic experiences in life causes you to do. So you usually want people to think, process, and logically go through things with things in the front part of their brain, those front lobes, those front categories. Like, that's the healthy place to process things. Traumatic experiences take you back to the amygdala, where you're dealing with, this is how I categorize it: fight, flight, or piss your pants, right? Some people call it freeze, but I don't think it's freeze. Like, I've seen people be so scared that they've actually peed their pants. So we want people to move from moving out there, because when you think back there, your reactions are so exaggerated and so dramatic, and oftentimes come from a place of lashing out. Like, we've created society to become so bipolar, right? By just always operating out of their amygdala and not from the rest of their frontal cortex lobes, all that good stuff that's up there. And so what we do every Sunday morning, what we do in small groups, what we try to do in Bible studies, is to do exercises. And I mean, these are simple exercises. You utilize both body movements, and I'm not talking about yoga. I'm actually talking about things like crossing your legs, sitting up straight, to to center yourself and some breathing practices that help take you out of concentrating out of the backside of your brain and your brain stem and moving it to the front parts of your head where you actually process in a logical way. And what we would contend in the church is when people do that, they have a better opportunity to hear from God, to process God's word, to process what some would argue might be the voice of the Holy Spirit, and to logically think and process about what is being preached about, sung about, all those types of those things. But if you don't take those simple steps to help center a person as you go into worship or as you go in to teach any class, I mean, teachers are doing this now in their classrooms. If you don't do that, you're not hitting the mark on anything that you're doing because they're not processing in a clear and functioning way. So you've wasted all your time throughout the week prepping whatever you're prepping to get across to people because they're simply not receiving it. They're thinking, am I safe? They're thinking, what's going to happen to me when I leave this place? They're thinking about all the other stuff that they're scared of in the world and not dealing with what's even right in front of them. So we do that for our congregation members. Now, we do it in the community by one, educating, but then two, like I work at an agency where I'm the on-staff therapist, and we do trauma-informed care. So they come in, I work in the HR department, and we take time to center ourselves before we have a conversation. People can come in and talk about adverse things that are going on in their life. It kind of relates a little bit back to talk therapy, but it's talk therapy partnered with finding some exercises to help them move to where they're thinking in the right part of their mind. And then also we run an after-school program because adverse childhood effects start in childhood, right? We deal with them as adults. So how do we begin to help children now so they don't have to deal with them as adults? And so we run things like a mentoring program where kids learn these self-care tips, because ultimately a lot of this is just self-care. You don't have to have me to do this. I teach you how to do it. And then anytime you're feeling stressed, anytime you're feeling worried, anytime you're fearful in an illogical way, because fear is right sometimes. It's good to be scared. It keeps you from getting hit by the bus. Yeah. But if you are dealing with fear in a very illogical way, like you just sit around and you're scared all the time or you're anxious all the time, I help train people to have those self-care to help walk them out of that. And we start teaching it to kids in our after-school program. And we partner kids with adults where they can talk about things. And we wrestle with finding out the kids. 87% of the kids in our program are at the poverty line or below. And so we get to begin to delve into some of these ACE issues, like, are my parents in jail, or am I being beat at home? And we can tackle those issues today so they don't have the repercussions of those situations for the rest of their lives. So that's kind of how we do it in the local church, and that's how we do it outside the church.
No, I love it. I love it. And as you've been talking about this as the adverse childhood experiences, I'm going to kind of take that, and I think we're going to talk through a little bit of the adverse church experiences. We can turn that ACE into that as well. Yeah. No, and so when we do this, and we've talked about this, I do it on the show all the time, but from your perspective also as a political consultant, meaning that you're a guy that also strategizes, you really project and look towards the future with stuff in many ways. And so what are your predictions, projections, and trends for the future of the American church as it stands right now? Like, what do you see moving forward?
Well, I see more and more people becoming disenfranchised with the church on all spectrums because of the church's political affiliation. Now, that's odd that a pastor who also does political consulting might say that, but I will tell you, I try to separate the two. Like, I think the church's job is to declare truth, no matter who they're declaring truth against, whether it's the right or the left, right? And so I see the church in all different sections. You have the mainline churches highly aligning itself with the left. You have the fundamentalist and conservative churches highly aligning itself on the right, and you have a small fraction of the church, and I think that fraction is growing, but you have a small fraction of the church just trying to proclaim justice, mercy, love, hope. But as those numbers, as the church continues to align itself with political factions versus the ideas of Jesus, I think we're going to see more people leaving the church. I think we're going to see more people disenfranchised with the church. And I think the church is going to lose a lot of its identity. On the left, I think it's going to lose its identity in connection to the spiritual things of God. And on the right, I think it's going to lose its connection to serving people and its focus on people, period. Right? Because it's all about this ideology that they're proclaiming that they've mixed with the gospel. That's absolutely not the gospel.
Because yes, we always must remember, which is very hard when you talk about loving your neighbor, it doesn't mean loving your white neighbor.
Right?
I know it's hard. I know it's controversial, but yeah, that's the way it works. So what I wanted to ask you too within this is what, like within Christians and especially Christians that are in leadership positions, what questions right now should we be asking?
One, I think we need to be asking, are our political affiliations more important than our faith communities? Because I am seeing more and more leaders who have their political affiliations more important than even the churches they pastor. They want the spotlight, and I think they think the spotlight brings them the prosperity. And while there are tons of denominations, conservative denominations, that would say that they are not prosperity gospel, the almighty dollar is what governs and guides and directs people's affiliations and people's allegiances. So that's the first question. The second question is something we touched on in the very beginning. Are we building relationships, or are we seeking to create a business? Right? Like if I walk into your church and the first thing that you tell me about is your business model, I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
I would say if that's really even in the conversation, or you're asking me to help because I do some consulting with churches. If you ask me what business model is right, or you phrase it in religious terms, so you don't strategies for reaching people, if that is your number one goal, how to increase your nickels and noses or butts and seats and dollars, that you're not into what the gospel is all about, or that faith is all about. It's about relationship, not just with God, but with others. Right. And so that's the second question. The third question, I think we really have to ask ourselves, and this is something that I wrestle with. And so, but what do we really stand for? Right? Like, pastors who will not comment on controversial issues, right? And I mean, really think about controversial issues, even if I disagree with you. I think more pastors often than not won't stand up for injustice, right? Not against it. Right? They won't stand up against oppression. They say that our God is for those things, but they won't take a stand against those things. And so I think that's a really big problem, because they think they will lose favor. They think they will lose popularity when they stand up for those things.
No, that's spot on. Keep going. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And so, that. And I get that. Anytime you really make a stand, yes, you're going to probably lose some church attendance. But if this is more about relationships and following the way of Jesus, or at least doing what is morally right, then yes, you may lose people, but when all is said and done, you're found to be righteous and just. I'll roll with that. I'll take that. Another question is, how are we going to deal with people who are hurting? Because most people in our congregations are hurting now. But if we continue to reach out to people, if you're one of those lucky congregations that actually gets to meet people where they're at and they decide to come and be part of your faith community, how do you deal with those people who come with brokenness? And they're not broken because they're not like you. All people have brokenness.
Yeah.
I have brokenness, right? And I do want to encourage people. You know, we talk about the pop therapist preacher who thinks they should be able to solve the world's problems because they have a Bible college or a seminary degree and one counseling class. But there is training out there. It's called trauma-informed care. And you can plug into that training so you do learn some of these self-care tips that you can pass on to your congregation. So you do know how to deal with broken people. So you do know how to wrestle through hard things. And I guess that leads me to the last question that a pastor and a church needs to be asking itself is, do we want to deal with hard situations? Right? Do we want to deal with people who are hurting, or do we want to deal with people who don't look like us? Right now in my church, I have a gentleman who grew up as a Muslim. His dad is a fundamentalist. He belongs to Hamas, and not that all people in Hamas are fundamentalists. So I don't want to demonize a group, but he is a fundamentalist. And if he knew that this individual was attending my church, he would be shut off from the family, right? This individual has not jumped all in, not been baptized, but he walks with us. He asks questions. More often than not, we find those people shut out. I have a young lady who literally claims to be a pagan who attends my church. But she wants to raise her children in a moral community, and she wouldn't mind if her children become Christian. She's not there, but how do we deal with her? And do we go to when she has her tree festivals and different things like that? How do we engage? I will tell you, I go. Why not? I get to hang out with people. We get to be friends. I mean, I don't have to fully endorse something or agree with someone to hang out with them.
Yeah.
And to learn and to see about them. And so, for a lot of churches, those are people that get shut out. We find ways to lovingly love them out of the church, or shut the door on them, or, just honestly kick them out. Like, they may show up, but we find a way to help them find the exit quickly.
Yeah.
But, we have a person in our church who literally is going through a sex change right now. How do you lovingly wrestle through that, right? So those are tough situations. And so do you want to make rules, right, that just writes people off? Or do you want to make decisions and get dirty and be in the business? No, be in the practice of love and relationships. So anyways, those would be the questions that I think we gotta wrestle with.
No, I love them. Thank you for that. So we're going to hit the rapid fire place as we get here towards the end. So, okay. So Justin, speaking of the church in America today, what pisses you off the most right now?
Our racism, our overt political affiliations, sexism, and bigotry.
What gives you the most hope?
To see small churches engaging in their communities and the lives of people and not trying to be the big business.
I love it. I love it. So now we're going to do a little bit of word association. We'll get a little psychological here on you. Okay, so I'll tell you some words, and I just want first thing that comes to mind. Got it? You ready? You comfortable? You're laying down in my office chair now. Okay, so Franklin Graham.
Dumpster fire.
Dogma.
Slavery.
Control.
Oppression.
Conservative.
You are a jerk. A political affiliation I used to roll with.
Okay. Theology.
Something that helps set people free.
Trump.
Dumpster fire.
Hell.
Why?
End times.
Cuckoo's nest.
That's my side note on this. I still have a few more left for you, but it's been pondering in my brain, like, why are conservatives not calling out like that? This is the end of the world with what's happening in Hawaii. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like this is ripe. Come on, people. Like, we've got serious, imagery happening here.
Hey, they'll be talking about it in 2 years.
Okay. That's the way their news works.
Yeah.
Okay, next word, grace.
Grace. Easy to accept, hard to show, but imperative in faith communities.
Jesus.
The prime example.
And so for this, I've got I'll ask you this. Is just really our last question today. So tell me about the last time that you had a sense of awe.
So just a few days ago, we talked about this. I'm going to admit it on air. I was wrestling with the idea of leaving the pulpit ministry or leaving local church ministry and just going back to the machine because it would be most comfortable. It would be most advantageous financially, and it would help free up some things. And so God and I were really talking about that, and I really said to God, I just need a sign. I just need something to help me know that I'm in the right place at the right time, and this is where I should stay. And out of the blue, a gentleman who I hadn't talked to for a few months just goes, I know you do a lot, and I know it's hard, and I know you're wearing out. Lean on Jesus and let him get you through. And I will tell you, I'm not all touchy-feely spirituality. I tend to lean in the more logical of things. But at that moment, I got into touchy-feely spirituality. It seemed like a serendipitous moment, and I really was in awe, and it re-entrenched my belief in an active and real God who works in the world and who isn't just far off letting things spin out of control.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's one of the things I love about you, my brother, is your transparency and your honesty, and that you are you. Or at least in my experience that I've, spending time with you, I've always gotten the you or you thing from it. Yeah.
You've seen me with a cup of bourbon and a cigar in my hand, so you got the me is me, right?
Yes,
like,
we have shared a hotel room more than once. And,
yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. So Justin, if people are interested in some of the work you're doing or anything else, or simply they just want to find a reason to stalk you and your sexy ass. So how would people go about finding a little more Justin Meyer online?
So on the ancient platform of Facebook, we are Grace Church.
I thought you were going to say like MySpace, but yeah.
No, on the ancient platform of Facebook, you can find us at Grace Church Richmond Mo, and that stands for Missouri. You can find us at www.findgracechurch.org, which is a lackluster website. And you can follow me on Twitter at Planting Network. So, because I used to be a director of church planting.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for being on the show. And I foresee this not being the last time And just want to tell you, thank you so much for your time, for who you are, and for who you are in my life as well too. So thank you, man. Thank you.
We got to do this just more often, maybe not even on the radio, because I miss you. I miss your family, and you make me a better person, brother.
Oh, love you, man. Love you, man. Thank you so much. And you have a great rest of your day. Well, thanks so much to Justin Meyer for being on the show this week. And that's all we've got here at Snarky Faith Radio. And I want to remind you guys, as we end this broadcast, you can catch us on podcast at www.snarkyfaith.com. You can also find us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, and everywhere else that you find podcasts. So thank you so much again for joining us another week. And I send you off with the holiness, grace, and peace, and snark. Have a great rest of your week.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.